Everyone, lots going on as usual. Today is Tuesday, June 17th, 2025, and Kash Patel announces that he's got new information referring to somebody important. I can't remember the name, but I've got it in the story about the 2020 election being stolen. Holy smoke. It's like somebody's actually doing something about that. Do you think something will actually come of this? From what I've seen, relitigating the 2020 election is not possible in any amount of time, not possible in 4 years, not possible in 5 years. It's been a long time and nobody can do anything about it. So now Kash Patel's found information and it's been referred, and will something change? I'm not sure. And I seriously and truthfully believe that if they can't fix the 2020 election, then Canada has no hope of a legitimate election. And if they actually do fix the 2020 election in the States, that gives me some kind of hope that we can fix things here. But I don't know. We'll see. I don't see any Trump-like politicians on our horizon, unfortunately. Sorry, Maxime Bernier, you're not quite there. What about the other contractors who are stealing from Canada? So the Conservatives and the other opposition parties passed a motion that said within 100 days of the motion being passed, the GC Strategies has to repay the $64 million back to Canada, and they have a lifetime ban. And it mentions the other companies that those two are a part of, so any ones that they touch. But what about the other ones that they don't touch, right? So it's just, I'm interested in the numbered companies. I'm interested in all the other people who are using this as a piggy bank, who did extract millions of dollars, who are kind of getting lost in the shuffle. What about them? We'll talk about that. Housing minister has $11 million invested in Canadian real estate. And so he's a landlord, right? He owns a bunch of property. And maybe that says, well, then he's going to make sure that, the housing market doesn't tank and things stay the way they are, so he continues to make money. Maybe, but also maybe that's a conflict of interest. Maybe you should have somebody who's good at running things but is not invested themselves to the tune of $11 million. What do you think? Let me know. They're trying to starve us with supply management. The food professor goes through how chicken imports have gone up by 50% in the last year from the United States, I believe, and egg imports have gone up by 100%. The United States fixed their egg problem. We didn't. And now we're importing eggs from there. Weird, right? Very, very interesting considering supply management and all the things that are going on there. So I've got the food professor this morning as well. People are catching up to what I said yesterday about the grooming gangs in England. The grooming gang report is going to be a way to wag the dog and take control of the narrative. And that's what they're going to do, I think, unfortunately. Trump floats Russia and China joining the G7. And man, yesterday evening, particularly about, 6 o'clock, I was at a baseball game, 6 o'clock, I guess, things started going off, and Trump, to the degree where by the time I got out of the baseball game and looked at my phone, Trump was leaving the G7. And I was like, what happened? Holy smoke, what happened? And so a whole bunch of crap happened yesterday. A lot of stuff happened. It was a very impactful day. And so there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, we're starting at the G7. Here's Mark Carney. And let me tell you, this video is X-rated. This is like up there with Jenna Jameson's level stuff. And she's enthusiastic. Okay, so careful if there are kids in the room. You know what I'm saying. Here's Mark Carney introducing Donald Trump.
Mr. President, welcome to Canada.
Thank you very much.
It's a great honor. Happy birthday. A few days short.
A little bit.
A few days short, but didn't have a chance to see you on the day. Happy birthday to the U.S. military as well, 250th, and this is the 50th birthday, if you will, of the G7. This marks the 50th birthday of the G7, and the G7 is nothing without U.S. leadership, and your personal leadership of the United States. Many issues, geopolitics, economic, technology, and working hand in hand with the United States, Canada and the United States, and the other G7 partners with your leadership. Very much looking forward to the meeting. I'm grateful to have you.
Thank you very much.
The us come out when he's off script and nervous. Interesting, right? Donald Trump gets there, and the us and the Oz and the
technology, and working hand in hand with the United States, Canada and the United States, and the other G7 partners.
Right? You hear that? Like, that's notably different than other practiced speeches Carney's given recently. He's working really hard on removing those speech tics. And a lot of people do it. I do it too. I just did it right there. But it's very difficult to remove. And he is working on it, honestly. But put in a situation like that, they come right back. Cat Turd says President Trump is visiting the 51st state today. I thought that was pretty funny. And here is not Holly Don't Table Salt saying, holy cow. After kissing Trump's butt for almost a minute in the opening remarks, Carney again singles Trump out at the G7 leaders and commends him for his leadership. So here's another X-rated clip, right? Here we go.
Nostalgia isn't a strategy. We have to change with the times and to build a better world. And some of you, such as you, Mr. President, have anticipated these massive changes and are taking bold measures to address them. All of us around this table are reinforcing our militaries and security services for the new world. But we all know that there can be no security without economic prosperity, and no prosperity without resilience. And in a world where shocks flow across the borders, that resilience comes from cooperation around that starts around safe.
So I saw this yesterday and I thought it was pertinent for the moment. So Mark Carney sitting around a table full of military and like other country leaders, big country leaders, G7 leaders, richest economies in the world, right? Everybody here is worth lots and lots of money. They represent lots and lots of money, and everybody is supposed to be cooperating. And Canada, little old Canada, is saying cooperation is really the most important thing. And I don't think that's Trump's edict. Trump is leaving the G7 to go deal with a world conflict because he's important while the other G7 leaders kind of sit around and do nothing, right? Which we'll get to in just a minute. But this is the BUAC says the total military aircraft by country. I started it over 3 or 4 times, but I can't find Canada for some reason. And Ken says they don't count anything under 100 combat-ready aircraft. We have 79 combat-ready aircraft fighters. That's pathetic. So Canada's sitting around at a table full of all these powerful militaries, and we don't even rank on this largest air forces in the world 2025 at all. So we need cooperation because we sure as heck don't have an air force. Iran starts with 551. We have 79 total aircraft. United Arab Emirates, 560. Algeria. Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought that I had to be quick. Hold on. I have to turn this. I don't like the volume. Algeria is 605, and Israel 612, Germany 618, Brazil 628. Brazil, they're not at the G7. Greece 632 total military aircraft. We don't need military aircraft. The United Kingdom has 664. Italy has 800. Saudi Arabia has 914. We would lose badly in any kind of conflict. North Korea has 951, France has 972, Turkey has 1,069, Greece doesn't have enough for Turkey having 1,000, Egypt has 1,080, South Korea has 1,171, Pakistan has 1,434, Japan has 1,459. I've played the Axis and Allies Pacific version. I can believe that. India, 2296, China, 3,304, Russia, 4,211, and I would imagine that the United States is the last one there. The United States has a lot more. This is why Canada doesn't have any. Hello, Mr. Trump. We love you, Mr. Trump. Hi, Mr. Trump. Could we borrow some aircraft? We think that maybe you could afford to, lend us some. Or whatever. Just patrol our Arctic. I mean, by the Canadian Arctic, I mean the North American Arctic region. Thanks. Here's Freya, and she says, President Trump, when asked if Putin should be invited to the G7, this is diplomacy. Yeah, correct. Here we go.
Do you think that he should have a seat at the G7 today, that it should be the G8?
Talking about Russia,
he should
Putin.
At this point, because too much water's gone over the dam, maybe. But it was a big mistake. Obama didn't want him, and the head of your country, the proud head of your country, didn't want him. This was a big mistake. You wouldn't have that war. You have your enemy at the table. I don't even consider him. He wasn't really an enemy at that time. There was no concept. If I were president, this war would have never happened. But likewise, if he were a member of what was called the G8 at that time, it was always the G8. You wouldn't have a war right now.
Why not have China at the G8? Why not have China here, the biggest economy in the world after the United States?
Well, it's not a bad idea. I don't mind that. If somebody wants to suggest China coming in, I think we suggest. But you want to have people that you can talk to. They don't talk. Putin speaks to me. He doesn't speak to anybody else. He doesn't want to talk because he was very insulted when he got thrown out of the G8. As I would be, as you would be, as anybody would be. He was very insulted. And
I would be insulted if I was thrown out of the G8 too.
I mean, he was thrown out by Trudeau who convinced one or two people, along with Obama. He was thrown out, and
It was Harper era. It wasn't Trudeau. It wasn't Trudeau who reduced the G7 or G8 to the G7. That was done before Trudeau came in. It wasn't Trudeau at all. So Obama, yes, I think it was Obama. I think it was during the 10, 11, 12. It was right around when the Pope was removed as well, right? In a strange way, not done since the 1300s.
he's not a happy person about it, I can tell you that. He basically doesn't even speak to the people that throw him out, and I agree with him.
Yeah, he doesn't speak with the people who threw him out, and I agree with him. So, yeah, interesting. And so a lot happened there. Somebody said, why not China? Trump said, sure, why not China? Why not China? Let's have them in. And he says, Putin comes and speaks to me. Better to have your enemies talking than no talking. Why isolate them and not talk to them? He makes a lot of valid points, right? Absolutely valid points. Here's, I thought this meme was funny. Kimmy says, this is funny, and it's Trump and Putin, and Trump says, I bet I can get all the Democrats to call me king on my birthday. And Putin says, there's no effing way you can do that. $5 says I can, homie. And we had the No Kings Day, and I just thought that was kind of funny, right? So Trump's going to the mat for Russia and a little bit China for G7, G8. And, why not talk to these people? They're huge, massive parts of our economy, and they are massive parts of our economy. I mean, Canada's economy depends on a whole, like the dollar store. How much stuff comes from China for the dollar store? How much stuff in the grocery store comes from China? Comes from to the dollar store from China. Same with Loblaws, same with Zayres, same with all of it. All of it. Our entire economy is built on importing, or most of the economy is built on importing. And that's wild, right? Don't you think that's crazy? I think that's a little crazy, right? And so we're sitting here pretending that we're such a forward-looking, thinking country, and we're so good and blah, blah, blah. We don't even need airplanes. We're so good, right? And we look down our noses at these other economies, and they're dwarfing us, right? In a whole bunch of different ways. And I'll show you in a minute. We're having a problem keeping our country supplied with chicken, thanks to the United States. Also, with those airplanes, could we have a side of chicken? Honestly. So that's what's happening. Here is Western Standard. By the end of yesterday, Trump had to leave the G7. Western Standard is reporting Trump leaving summit early due to escalating conflict in the Middle East. Yeah, by 6:30, things were popping off. Things were not so good. Here's Trump saying, I've got to leave, important business to attend to. Here we go.
Have any statement on why you're leaving the G7 early for Washington?
Well, I have to be back. Very important. I want to just thank our great host. Thank you in Canada. But you probably see what I see, and I have to be back as soon as I can and have dinner with these wonderful leaders, and then I get on the plane. I have to be back early.
Have you heard the National Security Council?
I loved it. I tell you, I loved it, and I think we got a lot done. Really, a lot done. In fact, UK, we signed a big trade deal today, and we're working on others. But we had just a really great relationship with everybody, and it's really nice. I wish I could stay for tomorrow, but they understand.
Is there a reason,
big,
Mr. President,
big stuff.
They understand this is big stuff. Big stuff out here. I got to go. So, big trade deal signed with the United Kingdom, he said. So that was a little hard to hear. Apologies about that. Raheem says, everyone I know in the United States government, which is a lot of people, I guess, is rushing back to the office right now, as is President Trump. Whatever they have planned is very big and very real. So last night, everything started popping off, I guess 6:30 p.m. And Donald Trump, I don't know when exactly he posted this, but he says, Iran should have signed the deal I told them to sign. What a shame and a waste of human life. Simply stated, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I said it over and over again. Everyone should immediately evacuate Tehran. And so he's presumably saying, things are a go in Tehran. After that, 7:55 p.m., Shadi says, oh goodness, Iran IRGC issued an evacuation order to Israel. In the coming hours, the IRGC aerospace force will carry out precise strike against the occupied territories, and the occupied territory is Israel, Palestine area, all of it. Any city, facility, or center within the occupied territories will be considered a legitimate military target. You must evacuate the cities immediately. So people are hearing that. And then here was America AF. It says China is now calling for their citizens to leave Israel immediately. Here is, so echoing those calls. And Fatux says Trump's social media post telling Iranians to immediately evacuate Tehran reflects the urgency of the need for Iran to come to the negotiation table, a White House official tells CNN, clarifying what Trump's statement means. So calm down, everybody. Hold on. Aviva Klumpes says Israeli news says the United States is attacking in Iran, but then there's a community note that says the White House has denied this as false. And indeed, Alex, who's a White House deputy assistant to the president and principal deputy of communications director, says this is not true. American forces are maintaining their defensive posture, and this has not changed. We will defend American interests. And so here's another one. X Alert says White House denies Israeli news reports claiming the United States is attacking Iran. What is going on? So there was a bunch of these guys were posting minute by minute different updates of different people saying different, like you should evacuate, no, you guys should evacuate. So all sorts of crazy stuff was happening last night during the baseball game. Sean, again, is official account for the assistant to the Secretary of Defense and for Public Affairs, chief Pentagon spokesperson or spokesman, and senior advisor to the Secretary of Defense. And he says American forces are maintaining their defensive posture, and that has not changed. We will protect American troops in our interest. So they're putting out the same messaging everywhere. Here's President Trump, and this is later on in the evening. And he says, I've not reached out to Iran for peace talks in any way, shape, or form. This is just more highly fabricated fake news. If they want to talk, they know how to reach me. They should have taken the deal that was on the table. Would have saved a lot of lives. So he's talking about that. And Cal is responding to this. I guess Tucker Carlson said something about Iran and all of the stuff going on. Trump's responding to this. He says, somebody please explain to kooky Tucker Carlson that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And this was 4:18 p.m. And then here's Marjorie Taylor Greene. She says, Tucker Carlson is one of my favorite people. He fiercely loves his wife, children, and our country. Since being fired by the neocon network Fox News, he's more popularity and viewers than ever before. He unapologetically believes the same things I do, that if we don't fight for our own country and our own people, then we will no longer have a country for our children and our grandchildren. And foreign wars, intervention, and regime change put America last, kill innocent people, and make us broke, and will ultimately lead to our destruction. That's not kooky. That's what millions of Americans voted for. It's what we believe is America first. So a lot of people are worried that Donald Trump is taking America into a war with Israel against Iran, and they were concerned that the tweet of him saying, Tehran, you better evacuate Tehran, was a signal that this war was on like Donkey Kong. But apparently not, and they needed to clarify, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But Israel is, as far as I understand it, still wanting America to provide counter missile support in the sea and all sorts of other supports to protect them against Iran and the other consequences of this war that they preemptively started for reasons like nuclear enrichment. But again, seems suspect to me. You're going to need to prove that before we, as a global community, authorize the first strike and all that. You can't just say they have nuclear bombs and we destroyed them all, so good thing we did that, and then we can't see the proof. Like that's a little suspect, right? I murdered that guy because he was going to kill me, so I got to him first. Can you prove that? Well, he said he was going to murder me, so enough said. So now, I mean, if there's some CCTV footage or something like that of them trying to stab you, you know what I mean? Like witnesses, things like that. But you need some kind of evidence, right? Some kind of evidence. You can't just do it and claim you did it for self-defense. It doesn't make sense. Here is Trump talking about, here is C3. Everyone needs to listen to this. Trump knew invading Iraq was a mistake. Trump knew invading Afghanistan was a mistake. Trump knew invading Iran would be a mistake. He's not going to stumble into another mistake. Trump knows what he's doing. So we'll see. It's 2 minutes. Fundamentally, Trump has a long history of being pretty consistent with his positions on things and of saying very clearly it's not America's responsibility for regime change wars in the Middle East. And so we'll see where this goes. We'll see if he maintains his record. Here's Brian, and actually I wanted to share Evan's thing. And Evan was saying Fox News and CBS News is now reporting that the United States will not join Israel in an offensive strike against Iran per U.S. officials. Thank goodness. So this cooled down by 8:30 p.m., I guess, ish. I was still seeing tweets all over the place by like bedtime when I was going to sleep last night. And I thought, well, we'll see how things look in the morning. Usually things calm down overnight. Not always, but sometimes. And so this is interesting, and lots of messaging. So this is coordinated, purposeful messaging to counter the disinformation and misinformation that was being spread by a whole bunch of people, both useful idiots, people who think that they're doing like what I'm doing now, like just telling you kind of what's going on, and by people who were purposely spreading false information in hopes that the useful idiots would pick it up thinking it's real. Does that make sense? So there you go. It is what it is, and that's interesting. Here's Charlie Kirk talking about Trump as well, saying this is the moment that he's been elected for. This is, he's not gonna join in this foreign war. So far, it looks like Charlie Kirk is correct. We'll have to see how things shape up the rest of the week. Do you think Trump goes back to the G7? I don't know. Here's Charlie Kirk.
Some people on the right, they're saying don't forget about Iraq. How are you reconciling these issues?
Well, first, this is the moment that President Trump was elected for. Thank God that we have President Trump in the Oval Office with this high-stakes situation. Look, President Trump 10 years ago, he went down the golden escalator. And when he announced for the presidency 10 years ago to this day, he remade the Republican Party on foreign policy. He said no more permanent wars in the Middle East. He criticized the Bush-Cheney philosophy of endless quagmires. Albeit, though, he is not an isolationist. He is willing to use violent and precise force against our enemies, like taking out Soleimani or dropping the Moab, if and when necessary. President Trump understands his base extraordinarily well. He knows that his base does not want another Iraq. He does not want Libya, does not want a civil war or bedlam where the United States is left carrying the bag. But also President Trump has been morally clear for a decade. Iran should not have a nuclear weapon. And President Trump has the talent, the expertise to be able to thread that needle. The generation that I represent, Jesse, the under 30 crowd, they absolutely are very war weary. Many of them voted for President Trump on college campuses because they did not want to see a Joe Biden or George Bush philosophy where we get into this endless conflict where we're sending hundreds of billions of dollars. I think President Trump will be able to balance those two things while defending our allies, saying that Iran will not have a nuclear weapon without having to deploy a single American troop or even having America involved from the sky. President Trump can get that deal done while fulfilling the mandate that the voters gave him.
Yeah. We'll see. That's the needle he's trying to thread, right? So it's very, very interesting. In more local Canadian news, although I think all of that is very, very influential in Canada, all of the fallout of all of that is going to affect us in a big, big way, right? Trump may ask for us to fly some planes or something. Michael Barrett says, motion passed. The Liberals have 100 days to get Canadians their millions of dollars back. So here's Michael Barrett talking about this.
Hey folks, just leaving the House of Commons, and this is big news. We had an Opposition Day motion last week that was on notice in my name and seconded by my colleague Kelly McCauley. You'll know him from the Mighty Ogo, where Kelly's the chair. And this motion was about the $64 million in the Arrive scam, which the Auditor General determined was a project where there is, in many cases, no proof that the work that was paid for by taxpayers was done, that security clearances weren't in place where they needed to be in place, and the government initially, the Liberals, voted against having the Auditor General even investigate. So we put this motion on notice last week, and we used it as our Opposition Day. And there's a lot of things we could use for an Opposition Day motion, but here is a case where it's tens of millions of taxpayer dollars in a time when Canadians are struggling to get by, and we have the Liberals with Prime Minister Carney saying it's a new government, he's a new Prime Minister, it's going to be new days and new ways. So we said, you know what, let's give them a chance to do the right thing. So this motion was giving the government 100 days to get taxpayers their money back and to not have a 7-year ban for just the company name that was involved in this case where all of the procurement rules were thrown to the side, where Canadian...
They banned the people themselves as well. So here's Leslie Lewis being a little more concise. She says, today, all opposition parties voted to pass our conservative motion to get back all the money from GC Strategies, the company behind ArriveCan. GC Strategies was awarded nearly $100 million in government contracts, often with zero proof of work being completed. Our motion gives the government 100 days to get the money back and ban GC Strategies from any further federal